It's no secret that the Nintendo Switch has been a very profitable console, especially coming after the underperforming Wii U. While it has had some good ports, there are also some that don't have the best reputation. A good recent example is the Mortal Kombat 1 Switch port. While even MK11 didn't look amazing visually, MK1 seems like a lot had to be sacrificed in order to even get it to work on the Switch. Looking visually comparable to a mobile phone port, which partially makes sense since the Switch is part handheld, but it looks vastly different than the versions the other consoles received. Even more recently, Hogwarts Legacy also released on Switch, and again, looks like some sacrifices had to be made in order for it to run on the Switch. Although sometimes it is hard to optimize a game and perfectly translate it to a system it wasn't intended for, or a console that might be underpowered in comparison and can't run the game properly. Maybe it'd be possible after given a certain amount of time, but that might not be a guarantee. Some people, including myself, weren't sure if even Persona 5 Royal would be able to run on the Switch as well as it does, but it was probably able to be accomplished with some extra work time on it to release concurrently with the PS5 and Xbox versions. And to be fair, it was also originally based on a PS3 game which ended up being enhanced with some extra stuff for the PS4, so it doesn't sound too bad when you put it like that. Unfortunately, Persona 3 Reload doesn't seem to be releasing on the Switch, even though it will have a PS4 release, which can either mean a later release date on the Switch, or it being ported to the Switch successor down the road. So only time will tell what happens with that. With all due respect though, the Switch hasn't been the only offender. I mean, to be fair, take a game like Black Ops 3 as an example. When you compare the PS4 and Xbox One versions to the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions, the difference is night and day. It seems that it was supposed to release exclusively on the newer consoles, and that the previous generation consoles may have been an afterthought. Possibly for those that haven't bought the newer consoles, but still want the same experience. Because Black Ops 2 and the other COD games released for the PS3 and Xbox during that era looked pretty fine, with problems arising when the devs tried to port a game intended for the PS4 and Xbox One to the previous gen. In the case with the Switch, given the success that it's had, lasting part of last gen into this current gen, it makes sense that while it's getting all these ports, some of them might not land. Which may or may not come from the lack of third-party support that the Wii U had. So maybe it's both Nintendo's way of compensating for that, but there's also a lot of people who only buy games if it comes to a Nintendo console. It does make sense though. If you have one console already and are fine with it, you shouldn't have to buy another console to play third-party games. But who knows, maybe when the successor for the Switch comes out, it'll be easier to port some of these games to that console, since Nintendo would most likely be working with more advanced and powerful materials than they did when making the Switch. Or if even the current Switch carts may be compatible but manage to be upgraded in a way, with an example being the PS4 to PS5 upgrade, if that's even possible for the Switch. It seems like for some time, Nintendo consoles such as the Wii, Wii U, and Switch have been less powerful than the competition of that time, but I don't know to what extent them being underpowered has been a detriment regarding third-party ports. The Wii with the PS3 and 360, and the Wii U and Switch with the PS4, PS5, and Xbox generations, with the next Nintendo console probably existing a decent amount of time before the next Sony and Microsoft consoles. As technology has advanced and right now it's noticeable for Sony and Microsoft, the same might not be said for Nintendo. Well, at least not yet. But to a large extent, that mostly applies to the third-party games coming to the system. Whereas with Nintendo, understandably their first-party games are mostly optimized for the intended console. Since it seems that Nintendo is mostly focused on making a console that's best optimized to run their games primarily, with third-party support being an added bonus. So for the most part, Nintendo knows their console better than some of the third-party developers that work on porting games to their console, but to a huge degree, you can only do so much. And maybe extra development time can actually make a difference. Or if it can't, the final product may be the most the developers can do with the port on the Switch. Take the Batman Arkham Trilogy for example. That was supposed to come out October 13th, but instead, it was delayed to December 1st. Hopefully giving the devs extra needed time to port these games to the Switch without feeling the pressure to rush too much. But even then, the Arkham Knight portion seems to draw the bulk of the complaints. While it's certainly not the best way to play it, it does seem to be functional enough, but it isn't able to run as smoothly as the PS4 and Xbox One versions. Because given how powerful the Switch is compared to its competitors, it seems like some corners may have had to be cut, or extra development time was needed in order to run the game on the Switch as best as it could. And hopefully games that are ported to the upcoming Nintendo console are done if it's doable, and not just for the sake of it, if that makes sense. Maybe it won't be too much of an issue if the Switch can, for the most part, run a fair amount of these pretty big games. Maybe the Switch's successor will be easier to port third-party games to. And with the technology advancing to a certain point, it seems likely that it'll be easier to port or optimize game for every system going forward. Well, probably within reason. Because I do feel like technology can only advance so much so quickly, and there's gotta at least be a point where there are slight differences, be it in video quality or how well the games run on each system, where the difference is near negligible. So hopefully around the time the Switch successor releases, it'll be able to handle third-party ports almost as well, if not as well, as its console gen mates. Possibly cutting out the cloud-only port treatment that RE2, 3, 7, and 8 got, as well as the Kingdom Hearts series and others got. Who knows, it might be able to run current Switch games more optimally if it is backwards compatible. Before I wrap this video up, I just want to say that I'm not trying to make a defense of anyone here, I'm just trying to give my thoughts on this matter and see if my reasoning is valid. Maybe someone else can provide more insight into the matter than I, or point out any comments that I made that I may need to elaborate on if I missed something or didn't explain them well enough. So if I'm wrong on anything, feel free to correct me on it if necessary, or I could try to explain my point of view better and maybe continue the discussion in the comments below. Anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the matter in the comments below. Until the next one, take care.